I'm sort of wondering whether we'll lose a generation of entrepreneurs and small business owners. I'm not sure who's going to come out the other end of this, and whether, if you work for a large company or organization that can sort of weather the storm, or that has the government backstopping you, then you'll be all right. But it'll be interesting just to see how many people are keen to go the entrepreneurship route, start up their own small business, given what we're going through now.
My guest today is a great guy. His name's Robb. He's the manager of communications at the Faculty of Science at McMaster University in Hamilton. He's been a business book reviewer for the Hamilton Spectator for more than 2 decades. And this guy is a hardcore walker. He walks about 20 to 25,000 steps a day. You got to hear the story about how he started, had a profound positive impact on his life, including dropping almost 70 pounds. It's something that you can do as well. Lots of great stuff in this episode. This is my conversation with Robb. Very delighted to have Robb with me today. Jay, how are you doing?
I'm well, Warren. How are you?
I'm okay, thanks, in these interesting times.
Yeah, my kids are they're getting their money's worth out of Netflix and Crave and Amazon Prime.
Hopefully the internet doesn't shut down because of all of this. That'll be the last thing to go. So thank you very much for your time and making the time to chat with me today. Why don't you take just a minute or so and describe, just explain to everyone who you are and kind of what you do.
What I do? Yeah. So I am lucky enough to be the manager of communications at the Faculty of Science at McMaster University. And then before that, I've worked in PR, I think now for 27 years. And I've worked at the university, college, DeFasco, our Strength is People. Worked at Hamilton Health Sciences and then a provincial association before that. So spent my career in PR. Graduated from the Harvard of the North, which would be Western, which I think you also went to.
I did, yes.
Yeah, got my master's in journalism there. Realized early on that I didn't quite have what it took to work in a newsroom, so I crossed over to PR, and that's sort of worked out well. And then on the side, sort of my side hustle, I reviewed business books for the Hamilton Spectator, and I started that back in the fall of 1999.
So how many books do you think you've reviewed from over the past 20 years or so?
Yeah, so first couple of years, it was like 2 or 3 books a week. And then the kids came along and I got scaled back to every other week. So you're probably looking at more than 500 books over those 21 years. Any
standouts, looking back at 2 decades of books? I'm sure a lot of them blur together, but if you had to curate a top list of books you'd want to recommend to folks, are there any that jump out at you?
Yeah, I usually give that answer that you just gave, that they do tend to blur. I mean, these aren't great works of nonfiction, so it's more the ideas behind the books that you tend to remember, not so much the authors or the titles. And we've read 500 of them. They do tend to all blur into one. I think
you just crush the egos of all those authors of all those books.
No, but they're all I'm really lucky that I get to choose what I review, and I figure I'm not going to review lousy books. Because there's no interest in doing that either for me or for the folks who read them, who read the reviews and then might buy the books. So I sort of weed out the ones that aren't of low or no value to begin with. That's sort of how I approach it.
So we have a lot of people who are, they have this unexpected downtime, working from home, working with kids, running around, some of them rediscovering reading or audiobooks for that matter, if they're out wandering, and we'll talk about that in a bit. What's the top book you've reviewed in the past, 3, 4, 5, 6 months? Something that you could recommend right off the top of your head to somebody that would give them 1 or 2 ideas that they could employ from a business perspective.
One of the really good books that I just read was Fanocracy, and it was talking about. This is how quickly things change. So it's talking about there was a move from everything being online and digital. People were craving face-to-face, offline opportunities to connect, to have experiences. It was a fantastic book, but perhaps now totally irrelevant.
Well, for now anyway, we'll see.
For now,
we'll see what the new normal looks like, I guess.
Yeah, it could be groups of 5 going forward. And I think that, for me, that's the most interesting thing, is to see what titles are going to be coming out in 3 or 4 months. Like how quickly folks can get a book out the door, that talks about how do you lead a high-performing remote team,
right.
How do you build culture when nobody's under the same roof. I also think, like if you're someone who spent 3 hours a day commuting, and now you have this sudden stop and you're at home, are these folks starting to reevaluate how they were living? And if they're lucky enough to go back to a job, will they go back to it? Like,
right.
Will they lean out? And I think we're going to see some of that, where people sort of say, the grind, you sort of get used to it, and then it goes away, and you're at home with the kids, and you don't have those 3 hours that you're in your car. How excited are you to go back to that? It'll be interesting to see if that's a trend. Like if people start to lean out rather than lean in and say, what I thought was important isn't, and what I took for granted, I realized actually is the most important. Anyway, so I think we'll see. Like I have a huge stack of business books on my desk, and I would say a whole whack of those titles are now irrelevant, or they're just not important to the times.
Really?
Yeah, like if you think of, like, we're going to be coming out of self-isolation, but are we going into a recession? Are we heading towards something that's not quite a depression, but more than a recession, right? You're sort of looking at unemployment numbers of like 20%, which is staggering, which is just below the peak of the depression numbers. So,
maybe I'm naive, but I'm trying to view this, I think, as a 2 or 3 month cycle, after which hopefully there's some solid government support. And I'm hoping that communities and people come together a little bit more. Like I'm sensing people being a little friendlier, a little more patient. Some of them are complete dickheads hoarding toilet paper. But I think that events like this help to amplify who you are already. Like, so the compassionate people become more compassionate, and the jerks are exposed for being bigger jerks. And I'm trying to be optimistic about what comes out the other end of this. And I'm hoping that, with government support and people rallying around their favorite Hamilton pizza joint, right, that we might be able to, and I just use that as an example because I think that's where you're talking to me from today. And you do have an amazing pizza place there that I found in the last couple of months. I forget the name of it, but it's like ridiculous. Do you have any that come to mind, pizza joints in Hamilton?
Pizza joints that come to mind. Oh, we have there's one at the end of the street that we just tend to use when we're sort of jammed for dinner.
Hopefully they make it out. Yeah, it's interesting, but the fact, like, can you said you have this stack of books. What are some of them that you think would be irrelevant given the times that we're in now, or like what are the topics that they're on?
I'm sort of wondering whether we'll lose a generation of entrepreneurs and small business owners. I'm not sure who's going to come out the other end of this. And whether, if you work for a large company or organization that can sort of weather the storm, or that has the government backstopping you, then you'll be all right. But it'll be interesting just to see how many people are keen to go the entrepreneurship route, start up their own small business, given what we're going through now.
Yeah, there could be a lot of them dropping off the radar for sure.
Yeah, but I also think, like, going back to what you said earlier, I think there's going to be a lot of folks. We're all sitting at home, and there's some time to, I think, rethink and reevaluate, and then sort of reinvent ourselves. I think we're going to see some of that. Like I said, I think there'll be some people who choose to lean out, who say, you know what, this month, hopefully a month, of not commuting 3 hours a day was an eye-opener, and I don't want to go back to that.
Lean Out sounds like the title of a book. Maybe there's one in there for you to write.
I was going to say, you know what? You should be. Are you writing a book?
I've been writing a book for the last 20 years. It's just, it's going kind of slowly, but I'm working on 2 in parallel, which is probably a bad idea. But I have thrown down a few thousand words in each over the past week. So that is one of, again, my business has been so busy, go, grind, travel, and kids. And, these ideas that you want to express through a book, because I could get hit by a train or the COVID virus, or, I couldn't imagine having the time to do it until I quote unquote retired, right, someday. And at that point, the book doesn't, do much good. So I'm trying to see this pause as an opportunity to do some of those things that I haven't had time to do for years. And that's one of them, is to actually take what's in my head, which is not that much, granted, but to take that and throw it down on paper.
Yeah, no, you're being modest. So I've seen you present, and I've been through your training. If you could capture that, like take your personality in the training and in your presentations and just put it down on the page, it would be a great book. Like, it's all there. You should totally do it.
Working on it, so keep it posted.
Is it a media relations book?
One is media relations, and one is how to communicate in a crisis. And they would go together. And one's more of a deep dive on interviews, and one's more of a deep dive on. And it's not a flow chart, so to speak. Like, there were a lot of communications books about operationally, what do you do? This one's more about rewiring the executive's brain, because one of the things that I've noticed over the years, and there's been some great crisis books that have come out in the past year, the Melissa Agnes one, Crisis Ready.
Yeah.
But what I've noticed with a lot of executives, if you look at companies like BP or Boeing or Robb Ford or Tiger Woods, situations like that, where you have people who have a lot of resources, they're intelligent individuals, they're successful in their fields of endeavor, but when a crisis hits, they make inexplicably bad decisions. And I'm really interested in finding out why that is. And I really believe that it's a lot to do with human psychology and the way that our brains are wired. And when you are faced with a crisis, whether you're a CEO or an executive director or a frontline manager or a business owner, I really believe that primitive part of your brain kicks in, and then all of the strategic thinking and all of the empathy is the first victim to fly out the door. And your brain is telling you, how do I make this stop? How do I get out of this situation? Because you're not thinking properly. And so that's really the one objective of the one that I'm working on, is to understand that element of your brain and to rewire it. And then through examples to show people how it's done poorly, how it's done well. And then that would be, to me, a jumping off point to some of those other business books where they get more into the operational stuff. Yeah,
no, I think you're onto something there. And I tend to find, like, in a crisis, it kind of reveals who you are.
Right.
And like with empathy, a leader can't fake it. Like, they think they're faking it. And maybe when times are good, they can get away with it. But when there's a crisis, or when things go sideways or off the rails, they tend to get exposed. Mm-hmm. And like, over my career, I've been really lucky to work with some great leaders who are just really good people. They didn't have a sense of entitlement. They were grateful. They were gracious to everyone. And they would invariably shine in really tough times. And you could count on them to do the right thing. So, like, I'm fortunate now that I'm where I am with the Faculty of Science at Mac. Really strong leadership who are just doing the right thing, genuinely care about students and colleagues. It makes a huge difference. But I've also worked for leaders who, their head just wasn't in it, or they were looking forward to their next gig, or they just weren't very empathetic people to begin with. And there's no amount of PR that will get you out of a crisis if you have a leader that's just not empathetic or compassionate in a genuine way.
Well, you're exactly right. And it does expose people. Crisis, it exposes the good and bad. Like, you think of Maple Leaf Foods, which is one of the Canadian examples that everyone uses as great crisis management. And then the one that I've been really talking about a lot when I do conference talks. And it's interesting because I knew I was videotaping these talks over the past year or so, and I was really taking Boeing to task and their leadership for the way they handled the sort of 737 MAX 8 situation. And
yes.
was calling them out and saying, like, 10 months later, why is the CEO still there? Like, he shouldn't be there. And then they fired him, or he kind of quote unquote resigned. I think it was Christmas Eve or 2 days before Christmas. They tried to kind of like tuck it in under the holidays and gave him a $60 million.
Spending more time with family, I think is what that's called.
Yeah, spending more time with family after one of the biggest, train wrecks. And so now you see those bad decisions have been compounded by the situation that we're in now. So the operational defect, they tried to deceive the public, whistleblowers, 2 crashes, class action lawsuits, and now you have like the company's basically crippled and begging for a government bailout. And then all of those things are, if they would have dealt with it properly within 24, 48 hours, maybe they changed the leader then and demonstrated leadership, maybe they're in a different spot today.
I mean, the culture change that'll have to happen there. It's going to take years and years.
Donald Trump's another name that comes up. Here in Ontario, people have been overall, I think, impressed with the way Doug Ford, who has not been a universally loved premier, has really stepped up. Very nonpartisan and very action oriented. And Justin Trudeau, the same thing. You're seeing a lot of people on both sides saying that these leaders are doing a great job. Some of the medical officers of health and experts that have just demonstrated empathy and leadership and caring. And then you have someone like Donald Trump, who is, trying to put the economy over lives and trying to, pretend that he's a medical expert. And that is, to me, I think that without this situation taking place, he was almost guaranteed to win the next election. And I think this will be the crisis that undoes him, because it's hard to, and we're just, we're nearing the end of March here. And I think the worst is yet to come in this wave in the States, and they're poised to become like the epicenter of this crisis. And I think that's going to be tremendously damaging. And again, because of decisions, when you're putting the, what the Dow Jones Industrial Index is at over, grandma and grandpa, that's bad leadership.
Oh, yeah. And maybe we shouldn't elect politicians who have huge business interests that could become conflicts.
Of course.
I mean, I'm sure Mar-a-Lago isn't at 100% capacity through this crisis, and bills are coming due.
Of all these books that you reviewed, do you actually read the paper copy of all of them, or are some of them, are you an audiobook fan, or is it all hard copy for you?
No, all hard copy. So I need to, you can tell if it's a really good book because I've sort of dog-eared every other page, but I need to physically hold it. And I tend to read them. I have a stationary bike in the basement, and then at night, when everyone else has called it at night, I'll go down and chew through the books. So people often ask, like, do you read the whole book? And yes, because if someone took the time to write it, I should at least take the time to read it. Yeah, not audio. I listen to a lot of podcasts, but I find the audiobooks just kind of goes in my ears and then out. So no, I need the hard copy book. Have
you found any that you've been in the middle of and you're like, I can't finish this, and you just kind of toss it aside and start the next one?
No, like, again, the Spec's been really good. Sorry, the Hamilton Spectator has been really good in that I just get to choose the books. And so over 20 years, I kind of know which ones to steer away from. So there's some business authors who are like the Stephen King of business books. It seems like they have one coming out every 3 months. That just sort of reheats what they've already done. So I avoid those. Business books that are like fables, where they make up a story about an organization or a leader. Can't stand those.
Would The Wealthy Barber fit into that? Is that kind of book?
Yeah, you know what? That was maybe the only one that I've ever read that worked. And I think it opened the floodgates for this.
So everyone tried to copy it, but not quite as well.
Not quite as well. It's like bad fiction, and then you sort of read it and think, surely to God you can find a real-life example that drives home the point that you're trying to make with your book. So I don't read those. Business books about like animals, where they turn animals into characters to prove some business theory. I will never read those. Memoirs that are clearly just sort of ego stroking, right. Don't read those. But fortunately, there's lots of other really great books. I tend to see, like, you'd write a great book on media relations because that's what you've done for years and years and years. So you've kind of done it, and now you're sharing that knowledge. Those are the kind of books I look for.
Oh, cool.
So,
well, I can't wait for your I can't wait for your harsh review a year from now.
No, and I'm not critiquing them. So they're not really business book reviews. They're more summaries of here's the key idea. And I try to, when I write them, I think of the person on the other end. What can I tell them that they could maybe adopt that day after reading the review? Is there a practical idea that they could put into practice?
Do you fancy yourself a writer at all?
No, I would say not.
I would think,
maybe
you've probably read more business books than anybody in the world, really. That to me would be that's a book. Without having to read 500 business books, here's what I learned, and here's what I can give to you. That sounds like a no-brainer to me.
Oh, all right. I don't know if it's a title anyone's really vying for. Reading the most business books. My wife got me a lending library, those lending libraries you put out.
Oh, yeah.
At the front of your house.
Yep.
Well, I got one for Christmas, which is fantastic.
Nice.
And
hope you've got some hand sanitizer on it right now.
I think we have to shut it down.
Yeah.
We also read a lot of fiction. I'm the only one that reads business books, but we also read a lot of fiction. So there's a mix of those. The business books do not exactly fly off the shelves in the lending library.
Well, it's a niche audience, but I love a good business book. I'm a big fan of audiobooks as well. And you're right, it takes a certain kind of focus to actually, because you find your mind wandering and then you can't remember the last 30 seconds. But I'm a huge fan of them as well. The one that I'm going through right now, just because I keep seeing it everywhere, is Never Split the Difference. I think the guy's name is Chris Voss, the former FBI agent. Did you do that one?
No, I've heard of it though. Is it good?
So far, I'm only like a chapter in, but it's written very well. And he was one of the top hostage negotiators in the FBI, and he is applying that to negotiation skills and how does that work in real life. And the part that I'm at right now, he went to visit some leaders in negotiation at Harvard, and they had this kind of interesting back and forth. So, but I've seen him. He spoke in Niagara Falls, I think, about a month ago, and I see him popping up all the time on LinkedIn. And a few people have said it's a great book, so I took the plunge and am listening to that. So. Now, is that the kind of book you would avoid because it's super popular, or is that something that you like? Is there what's your kind of checklist? Like, if something is like really do you review like Malcolm Gladwell books, or is that too mainstream?
No, there's the wisdom of crowds. If everyone likes it, there's probably a good reason for that.
Right.
So I don't shy away from those. And sometimes, that's what if everyone's talking about it, then it's probably worth reading. I tend to gravitate a lot to Harvard Business Review Press books, not to give them a shameless plug, but they're absolutely fantastic to work with, just on a reviewer publicist kind of a relationship. They're fantastic, and they put out really good titles. I've yet to read a Harvard Business Review book that wasn't worth the time, and they're not paying me to say that, but I just find those books consistently are really, really good. Yeah, you asked off the top, a Jay Baer, who's
I know Jay.
Top Triggers,
Hug Your Haters.
Those are great books. Yeah, I highly recommend those.
What do you think it is about his books that make them better than the ones that are kind of more not that interesting? Again,
I think there are some books that maybe it's hard to find it, that core big idea, that one idea that will actually help you run a better business, be a better leader, run better meetings or teams. There's got to be that one big idea anchoring the book, and then some proof points around it or some stories around it that can help you figure out how to implement that idea. Some books are missing that, but I find that the Jay Baer ones, he's a really good writer, great storyteller, and tends to be pretty focused. From page 1 to the last page of the book what it's about. It's not a mystery.
I understood for the last one, Talk Triggers, because I follow Jay on social media and have purchased some of his books to give away to people at conferences and things. But he rents a cabin in the middle of the woods and brings his computer up there, and he just kind of blasts out these books.
I could see that.
Sounds like a good way to do it.
That's what you should do.
Little pandemic-y right now, and the child obligations, but I think there's enough quiet time. Like I had 25 sessions scheduled over the next several months, and like they're vaporized. So I'm very confident they'll come back in the fall. But in the meantime, I'm not going to get a pause like this again until retirement or death. So I think I'm going to take advantage of it. So we'll keep.
You record your talks, though, right?
My conference talks, I do. Yeah.
Yeah. So almost like a straight transcription of those keynotes and presentations is what you should think about.
I don't know.
Because your content's all there. And just get your personality on the page. Don't sanitize it. Like when we read it, we should hear your voice, and it'll be a great book. And I think that, like when I think about the authors who are really good, like they have a very distinct writing style and voice that's their own. Anne Handley, I'm just reading her book, Everyone Writes. Finally got around to that. That's a great book. And like Jay Baer, they have a very distinct voice that comes through in their writing.
We'll talk about specifically Anne and Jay. Again, two people I'm familiar with online and sort of connected with. I wouldn't say I know them, but I know of their work. What would, if you were speaking to an aspiring writer to say, here are some elements that you should take for your topic, no matter what it is. If someone's writing about, how to make ice cream or how to run a business, what are the elements of their books that you think help them to rise above the ordinary?
I think they're like relentlessly focused on the reader, and it's not about them. And they're offering up really practical advice. I've read some books where it's a sales pitch and they're not giving away the best parts. It's almost like, here's an infomercial for my consulting business. In order to get the full picture, though, you have to bring me in as a consultant or as a trainer or a coach. Yeah, those are terrible books. So I think like if you're relentlessly focused on your audience and you want to give them great value and you're not holding anything back. So if you wrote your book, give everything away that you talk about in your presentations, which seems counterintuitive.
No, I totally get it.
And then have an editor. I've yet to read a self-published book that held its own against things coming out from like Harvard Business Review Press. So I would say to any aspiring writer, if you cannot find a publisher, that's probably a good sign that you're also not going to find an audience. So don't sink money into self-publishing a book because you're going to have hundreds of boxes in your basement and in the trunk of your car that you cannot get rid of. We only have so many relatives that you could give those to as gifts, right?
Right.
So I know there's lots of people that think, I'll just self-publish it and I'll find an audience. Well, no, you need the publisher who can bring an editor to the table to help you out, who can bring a publicist to the table, even just designing the cover, which you might not think is important, but it totally is. We do still judge books by its cover. That's some of the advice I give. And then look at, like you're ideal because you do a lot of keynotes and presentations. Like you have something beyond the book. So if you're an author, I would also say brush up on your presentation and speaking skills so that you can go on the road and you can give highlights from the book, and then you have the book as well for the audience. So writing a book is really just step one.
Right.
And then how do you
promote it and support it, create an ecosystem around it, a website for it, clips, videos.
Yeah. And like one piece of advice, just make sure you actually have something worth saying.
Yeah.
That's going to benefit somebody. That's going to help launch their career. It's going to help them get promoted. It's going to help them grow their business. Like you have to have that. It can't just be about you or how great you are or how great your organization is. Nobody cares or wants to read that.
Yeah, that's probably the biggest tip. And those books get pushed aside pretty quickly. Like, audiences are pretty, everyone values their time, and no one's going to sit there and read a book where someone's just stroking their own ego for 200 pages.
Yeah, nope. Those are vanity projects.
So want to switch topics a little bit now, and something that we chatted about last year, and we're both big fans of strolling, walking. And so are you still doing that every day?
I am. It's my daily habit.
And so I became a big fan of walking, like hardcore walking, like 15,000 to 20,000 steps a day. I think it was Father's Day of 2014. And my kids got me a Fitbit for Father's Day, and I went out and I started walking and realized that I loved it. And it was profoundly life-changing for me. And it's something that I continue to do. Realized that you had a similar sort of epiphany. I think it was a couple of years ago at this point, but can you talk a little bit about what that moment was where you, cause I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think you had had a pretty, busy career, fairly sort of sedentary lifestyle. And then you had a moment where you realized that you needed to kind of do something, and then walking became your thing. Can you talk us through that process a little bit?
Yeah. For anyone else who's in the same, so I had a former colleague at Mohawk who took a photo of me that I didn't realize he was taking. And I was not exactly the picture of health in that photo. So I kind of thought I was hiding it. I thought, I was fooling myself and fooling everyone else, but I didn't quite look the way I did. And I didn't recognize myself in the photo. And I'm sort of at that age where you can't really get away with it anymore. And so I was probably eating my way into a heart attack or some other unfortunate outcome. So that was really my wake-up call. I'm not a gym person. I've tried it. It's like so boring. And I did try running, but something tore in my knee, and it felt like I had a nail being hammered in my kneecap for about a year. So those two were out. And my parents were always walkers. Like they would always go for a walk after dinner. And I just started to walk. So after my colleague sent me his photo of me, I decided I needed to do something. So the next morning, got up at 5, out the door, and just started to walk. And I think like you, I figured out I do my best thinking while I'm walking. So if I have to write a speech, or I'm trying to think how to summarize a book in 600 words, and it's not quite coming out of my head, the 2-hour walk is the way I'll figure it all out. And usually by the time I get back home, I've got something figured out.
Do you know approximately when it was that you had that first walk?
It was like the dead of winter. Well, it wasn't the dead of winter. It was still winter, though. I remember it was snowing. It was so cold. I'm grateful that we didn't have a polar vortex this year, because I did walk in that, and that was that's the only time where I thought this was a pretty stupid idea. But
when it's 40
no,
below.
it was like in mid-March. Yeah, so it was still dark out. But if you go for a walk, you get to go through all 4 seasons. I like going in the morning because then you can watch the sunrise, right? You can have a really shitty day, and then the next day you realize the sun's still going to come up and life will go on. And I'm I'm very much an introvert. So the walks, like this whole social isolation and social distancing and self-isolation, like that's right up my alley.
That's on brand for you. Yeah, both of us.
So I find the walks. I've been waiting for this moment my whole life. But I find the walks, it just kind of recharges my mental batteries. And probably half the time, like I'm not listening to a podcast or listening to music. I'm just, like I said, sort of trying to, hammer out a speech or figure out the book review, or, I need a calm strategy for work.
Yep.
And that's where it all starts to come into play. So I find that, like, if someone's thinking about it, right, you're really overweight. Like, I've lost 65 pounds.
Wow. It's tremendous.
Really overweight. Yeah. Well, you know what? I was like eating like a 12-year-old, so it's not that impressive if you found out how my eating habits were. But like if you're in that spot, it's easy to do. I would do mornings because that's totally in your control. You don't know how your day's going to end. You might be exhausted by the end of the day. But if you get up at 5 o'clock, like, it's yours, and you can have that hour and a half or whatever it is that you can do. And then away you go. You watch the sunrise. You come back. And then mentally you're ready to go while everyone else is still waking up and getting into gear.
So when I started walking as well, was probably more than a few pounds over what I wanted to be, and similar, work and stress and just, eating whatever was around, or fast food, or eating at airport, pubs and stuff like that. And over the course of, I think the first 2 or 3 months, I was down, I think 28 pounds. So not as much as you, but like a life-changing amount. You've got to buy new clothes. And that you felt better, more energy. I think people are surprised to learn that just by consistently, because walking doesn't look like a huge workout. Everybody can do it. We do it all the time. But if you are consistent and you put on enough miles a day, and you have some sensible eating habits, like you can shed a ton of weight over a fairly short amount of time.
Oh yeah, and you're like it's both your physical health, but then also your mental health. I find much improved from doing that, and it's easy on the joints, so you're not looking at a hip or knee replacement at some point.
Yeah, I think it's great for the mind and the body. Cognitive benefits have been talked about for many years, but until you do it yourself, like I have some of my best ideas when I'm out walking, as you mentioned, problem solving. I did a bit of a pivot in my business. It was right around the same time that I was walking, because you have this time, and there's something about the cadence and the pace of it, and just you have this free time to think, and your mind starts bubbling up with these ideas. It's just I cannot recommend it enough to people. Yeah.
Do you do a lot of walking when you're traveling all over the country doing your training?
Not so much. And the last couple, I was in Calgary a couple of years ago, and I'd go out for a walk for an hour and wandering around by some highway. The last couple of years, most of my sessions have been mostly around the GTA and sort of like day trips, like to Waterloo or Kitchener or Kingston, something like that. So I've been fortunate that I've been around home, but I'm using this pause, and I'm fortunate I've got some trails near my house that are not heavily populated. I might see 3 or 4 people over the course of an hour and a half or 2 hour walk. And because again, the social distancing thing, I don't want people to think I'm kind of out running around in crowds, but I'm trying to really double down on that and make it part of the day. So I haven't done it today, but when we get finished chatting and I hit the record button, I turn it off, I'm going to go out and hit the trails for a couple hours today. So I guess you've already done yours for today.
Yeah. Get up, even though we're all working from home. Like I'm a creature of habit and routine, so I find if I don't get a long walk in, so I probably do 20 to 25,000 steps a day. If I don't get that in,
that's huge.
And then and I sometimes think my family wishes I'd go for a longer walk, but
right.
And if I don't also get to read, like those two things are sort of, if I don't get to do them, I get kind of squirrely and miserable and not a lot of fun to be around.
You feel antsy, like you need to get outside.
Absolutely. Yeah. It took me a while to realize, like, I'm someone, and I think there's lots of people like that. You have to move in order to think. And, in a gym, I'm just not into preening in front of the mirrors.
Right.
And watching CNN or Fox on the overhead TVs. Yeah. There's something about getting out, watching sunrise. If you can get a nature trail, that's fantastic.
Do you have the same route that you travel every day, or do you kind of mix it up a little bit?
Try to mix it up. Yeah. But we're really, really lucky where we live that there's trails that go right along the water. So I realize not everyone is that fortunate. And then I'm one of the really lucky ones. I get to walk to work too. So I'll do my morning walk, and then I've got like a 20-minute walk to work, which is fantastic. So. Right. And my daughter loves that the car stays in the driveway.
Have you converted any friends or family members to become walkers as well, or do you maybe not talk about it at all? Because I know there's the danger of becoming the CrossFit person.
That's probably a question you got to ask my wife. I try to dial it back. She's always been healthy, and she would shoot me the look like, "Do you really need to eat that?"
Yeah.
And maybe you should, think about being active. So. A little late to the party, and I don't want to be that guy that's, preaching to people, where I wasn't practicing it myself for 45 years. That's kind of obnoxious.
I find I find it's like hitting a reset button on a device, just going outside and just like
totally.
You will always come back in a better mood, and your heart is going, you have this little hum, your body's kind of buzzing. It's so addictive.
Yeah. And I'm surprised at the number of people who are out at 5:30 in the morning. And a lot of older folks, and they're not limping around like much of the hardcore runners will be soon enough. So you see like the 85-year-old who's out at 5 o'clock walking a little faster than I am. But I'm thinking, if I'm 85 and I'm still able to do that, that'd be awesome.
It's fantastic. Jeez. So I looked up some of I don't know if you're aware of any of the famous walkers from history, but the earliest one I could find was Aristotle, who would actually deliver his lectures while walking around the grounds of his school in Athens. And that's where one of the places where the term followers actually came from, because the people who were listening to him actually had to physically follow him around as he was walking.
Huh. I did not know that.
A little trivia for the day.
I've heard of him.
William, yeah, I think he's got some books as well. William Wordsworth, yeah. Charles Dickens. Charles Dickens used to do 20 to 30 miles a day, and apparently, if he didn't get the opportunity to go out, he was insufferable. Like he would just be climbing the walls. He had to get outside. It was like almost this obsession or compulsion that he had to walk, and that's where he came up with all of his ideas.
Yeah, I can relate to that. Yeah, I find and I even like walking in miserable weather. Now, not the polar vortex. I could feel my internal organs freezing on that walk. And I thought, this is really dumb. But, if it's raining, you just wear sensible clothes, right? I forget what the quote is, but there's no such thing as bad weather. There's just a bad choice of clothing. And, there are sometimes you go out and you got the whole trail to yourself. And as an introvert, you couldn't ask for anything more than that.
Exactly. What's the weirdest thing you've seen on one of your walks? Wild animals, strange human behavior, anything else?
No, I walk in pretty good areas. We do have a pack of coyotes that will be taking down deer around us.
You see the takedowns?
One time I was walking and a deer ran right in front of me. I thought, oh, that's cool. And then 3 coyotes ran right after it. And that was sort of the circle of life moment.
Yeah.
And I was glad that they preferred deer over me.
Yeah, you could have been part of the circle.
What a way to go.
Jeez.
Yeah. So I'm trying to think, it's really safe. We look out for each other on the trails and walking around. People are really friendly at that time of day. You think people would be
grumpy,
not quite awake and miserable. But no, I think I'm sort of thinking morning people are my kind of people.
So you must have had a profound change in clothing, 65 pounds to drop. That's like losing a 7-year-old.
Yeah, pretty much. And you can't get away with wearing the old clothes.
It does look like a tent.
Yeah, it looks like you're wearing your dad's clothes. So I think my only advice to folks would be wait until you're totally done. So I bought new clothes sort of halfway through, thinking there's no more weight to lose. But no, then you lose some more, and then you have to go out and do it all over again. And then get rid of the old clothes.
That was going to be my next question. Do you keep them as an insurance policy?
No, you totally get rid of them, because then you have no choice. To go back would cost you a fortune. So you sort of think, well, there's no turning back, and I'm going to fit into these clothes that I now have, no matter what. But
so I love that you have embraced this and that you're still doing it every day. I think it's a great thing. It doesn't cost a penny. Everyone can do it. You probably want to invest in some decent shoes. I did have some issues where I was walking extensively on old shoes, and I got that heel pain, plantar fasciitis. It was really bad for a couple of months.
Yeah, that's not good.
But so figure out what works for you. But here we are again. I'm trying to provide value to people who are dealing with stress, dealing with anxiety, concerned about work, and they have all this spare time. And walking is still one of the few things that you can do, even with the situation that we have taking place. I've noticed that when I was out on the trail yesterday, you'd see people coming up, and everybody is, very in a friendly way, keeping their distance. They would walk a few feet over on the right, on their right. I'd walk a few feet over on my right, and everyone says hello as we're walking by. This sense of community, but my one wish or piece of advice to people, and I'd like your input or advice on this, is to just get out of the house if you can and go for a stroll and take a look around and track your steps. When you don't, I think most phones, if you have an iPhone, I think they track that information automatically for you. Make it a competition with some friends, try to get people into it. But it's one of the most simple luxuries of life, is to just be able to stroll around your neighborhood.
Oh yeah. I mean, my walking to work every day, like, I realize I am one of the privileged few who get to do that. Like, that's probably, there's a lot of perks to the job. That might be one of the best. It's just the opportunities that, I get to walk to work. And then at the end of the day, I get to walk home. And they're fantastic walks. And also, like, another perk for me, I report to a dean and associate vice president, and they are continually reminding us to do exactly what you said. Like, get out from your desk. You cannot sit at your desk for 8 hours a day. Get out, go for a walk, clear your head, get some exercise, however you want to get it. Like, if, we're sort of dissing runners and gym goers, but if that's your thing, then definitely do it. But I think the trick is just to make it a habit. If it's something you do once a week,
it's not going to make a difference. Yeah.
It's so easy to stop doing it. And I used to be a night owl. Like, I would stay up till 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, and definitely not a morning person. And I flipped it. I still go to bed late, but to get up at 5:30, like, that really is the best time of the day. I know it might seem kind of annoying and obnoxious to say it, but it really is the best time, because that time is yours. Everyone else is asleep. And you can just do what you got to do.
One of the things that I want people to understand also is that, it sounds like you're about 50% listening to podcasts and 50% just kind of like taking in nature. I find that my walking is more enjoyable when I'm doing stuff. So I will listen to podcasts. I'll listen to audiobooks. I will, if I have a business problem going on, or like I'm trying to think of something from a marketing standpoint, I'll think about it and then send myself emails or make voice notes. And then,
I'll do that.
You'd forget those things, right? And you get back to the office and they're there. I do a ton of speaking at conferences, and before I started walking, I had never done that before. And it was actually on a walk that I had this idea that I said, I'm doing all these training sessions and I have these 2 or 3 topics that I talk about. Maybe that is something that I could do. And I actually, on the walk, started Googling conferences and started applying to them while I was walking. And then fast forward a few months, when I got my first one nailed down, to me, that's the best place to come up with your content. It's not at your desk. It's not in front of your computer. No. It's walking down a trail and kind of just incubating a problem in your head, and then coming up with ideas. Or I'd see something on Twitter and I'd send it to myself and I'd put them into this file. The ideas, I think they're 10 times better when you're out in nature, moving your body, when you're just walking along. The ideas they just seem to just come up from this well. It's so to think, I think a lot of people think of it as unproductive time or a waste of time, or I don't have time for 2.5 hours of walking. But you can clear your inbox. You can load your head with ideas. What would be your piece of advice to folks who are maybe feeling stress right now, maybe feeling heightened anxiety, aren't able to go, like the gyms are all closed right now, but you can go out and walk. What would be your sales pitch to someone to try to make walking a fundamental part of their life, to get them in better shape mentally and physically?
Yeah, well, I think you just did it. So I would echo what you said. Like, just start. And it's not a competition with anyone, not even yourself. Like, I just think you're going to explore, you're going to go out. And like you, like, if I come up with a great idea, I'm going to stop and I send an email to me, and I'm horrible with a phone. So sometimes I can't decipher what it is that I've sent myself, or it auto-corrects in weird and wonderful ways. But I would just start. It's not a competition. It takes a long time. Like, to lose that weight that I lost, it took the better part of a year. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be slow and gradual. But the reality is, you can't lose 65 pounds in a month.
No.
It might take you a short time to get that overweight, but it's going to take you a much longer time to lose it. And it's not I'm not really a competitive person, so walking is something I'm probably hardwired for.
Mm-hmm.
And just to be patient and cut yourself some slack. I lost 65 pounds, but that took like more tthan a year of walking. So it's not a competition. You're not competing with others. You're not competing with yourself. I found, I didn't tell anyone I'm going to start walking 2 hours a day and I'm going to lose 65 pounds. I just started to do it. I find some people talk a lot about what they're going to do, but just start, and it will be gradual, but totally worth it. You would ask, for people to say they just don't have the time. The average person, I think I saw somewhere spending between 3 and 4 hours a day on social media. Mm-hmm. So I got rid of my Twitter account, also good for my mental health, like a sunrise. Not on Facebook or Instagram or TikTok. So I have those extra hours that I can invest somewhere else, and I choose to spend it on walking. It just, like I said, as an introvert, sort of recharges my batteries, and like you, I tend to have all my best ideas when my feet are moving.
Nice. Hopefully you've got a few converts today, and you'll get some people out on the trails. What business book are you working on right now that you will see in the Hamilton Spectator in the coming weeks?
Let's see if I can find this here. It was good by a Toronto author, so it was Avery Schwartz. It was See You on the Internet, Building Your Small Business with Digital Marketing, which I think is probably an appropriate book for the time, because if you're a small business, right now the only way you're going to be seen is on the Internet.
Absolutely.
And everyone that's where everyone's going to try to chase customers and get noticed. So her book was really good. She runs a company that helps small businesses and nonprofits figure out how to do digital marketing. So if you run a small business and you're not quite sure, you feel like you should be on every social media platform and you don't know quite what to do with your website, this is a really good primer. I got some great ideas out of it that I'm actually going to apply to my work. So that's where I'm at right now. I think if you're a small business, you write a book like you're doing in your time off, but also figure out how you can have a strong presence online so you can sort of weather the storm that we're all going through.
And with that, we will wrap it up. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Warren.
Enjoy the rest of the day.
Writing your book.
Yes. All the best to you and your family. Stay safe, and we will talk to you soon.
You too. Get out for a walk.
Big thanks once again to Jay for taking the time to speak with me, and thank you as always to you for taking the time to listen. Please pop over to Apple Podcasts, leave a like, a comment, a rating, something that will help other people find the show. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.